Office Hour 17. We're here. Brendan, welcome.
Welcome to you.
Thank you. How are you feeling today?
I mean, we've been having some conversations this morning, so I'm awake. Let there be no mistake. I'm awake this morning.
Awake, hyper,
triggered,
conspirator.
Man, there's a lot of theories, Nick.
There are a lot out there, and man, a lot has been going on with UFOs recently.
Shoot, I mean, I haven't dug deep yet because I clearly have, as you can tell, a lot of thoughts on my plate. But yeah, like we're getting some real new footage out there. I don't know if you follow the news network that's only on YouTube called The Hill. They're pretty good at being like dead in the middle. They have got two hosts. They're kind of on each side of the center. Mm-hmm. So I really like their perspective they take. And they had a guy on, the guy who's done UFO stuff on Joe Rogan's podcast. And he did the documentary on Bob Lazar. I haven't seen it, but I know of it. And, and he was like breaking down what we were seeing. Yeah, apparently we've got like footage of a unidentified flying object. Let's be very clear. When we say UFO, it just means it's an unidentified flying object. It does not mean alien, but something that went from the sky into the water, which is wild. So,
yeah, I saw the video. I saw that clip of that thing just dropping in pretty fast.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hyped.
And like the propulsion systems are the most like interesting part of this whole discussion.
How it's able to like drop in and then come back up,
or just the way it moves. I'm gonna absolutely clobber this. This is gonna be terrible. People are not gonna fully understand. But to just draw a comparison between the only propulsion systems that we know and have, man, and we're starting off with UFOs on Jamie Krems' episode. If she's listening to this, I apologize, but we're doing it.
Yeah, sorry.
So the propulsion systems for current jets, let's say, right? It's a very clear reaction and two forces going opposite directions that propel a jet forward, right? Like you've got the combustion engine pushing force and energy one direction that propels through a reaction that pushes a jet the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. And then it's manipulated with wings and fins and everything on the jet. Well, they're saying that these systems very likely seem to be some kind of like, the only way they can describe it is like a bend in reality, so that they're changing the spot in the, I don't even know what, like in gravity in front of or in the direction that it's moving, so that it's essentially falling. So and this is, okay, so if you want like a deep dive on this, I would highly recommend people listen to, there was a recent interview that Joe Rogan did with a guy who is a former defense secretary, I believe, who has had a lifelong interest in UFOs. While he doesn't like really get into it, he's pretty pragmatic with his approach of like analyzing this data. But he has like they have a pretty succinct description in that video of the propulsion systems and how, yeah, there's like a new element that is like discovered, and like on how they potentially could harness the energy to produce this, because it's extremely energy intensive to create a reaction like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, the moral of the story is it's something that we can't even fathom. Like we don't even understand the degree to which, and then so they can just do it in any direction. So that's like ridiculous. Again, let's figure out what these things really are. Like from my understanding, there's even more unreleased, non-classified videos out there that just haven't like made its way from, Air Force or Defense Department, labs or whatever into the public. But I mean, there's some serious questions out there.
Here's another question.
Send it.
what if those clips are just fake?
They could be.
What if they're fake and it's all a big distraction to take away from something that something that's really going on?
Do you have anything that you'd propose that could be going on?
I don't know. My mind shot to these Krispy Kreme donuts being handed out for vaccinations. That's pretty sus.
You think the UFO? Oh, that's absolutely. Have we talked about this on an episode before?
We have.
I feel like we might have. I think I may have just like expressed my absolute disgust in this.
Oh yeah, I think you did.
But yeah, I mean, do I think the UFOs are being released as a means to distract the true intentions of the Krispy Kreme donuts? I don't think that one's quite there, but I like where your head's at.
We need a balance, so we're always gonna play devil's advocate for each other, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I don't know, man, but yeah, the world's a wild place. It makes you rethink a lot of stuff. If we think that, like, man, there could have been these things out there all along.
Yes. Well, I mean, even on a different type of level. So Adam Grant wrote his book, Think Again. I haven't read it yet. I bought it. I'm excited to read it. But I've been listening to a lot of his work life podcasts.
Love it.
And I don't know how long ago this was. This was after he published the book, but he did another conversation with Malcolm Gladwell, and they were talking about his book, about Think Again, and also about Malcolm Gladwell's like 4 books, and how, I don't remember the names of all of them, but each one almost contradicts each other. So he has outliers.
On the shelf over there.
Yes, but then he also has, what's the other? David and Goliath, which talks about how like the underdog can really win out.
Yeah.
And they just went through this whole idea of like, we had these original ideas that we thought were so paramount and so like stable and concrete in what they meant. But they were all wrong in some context.
Explain.
So outliers. People took away from it the 10,000 hour rule, that if you practice something for 10,000 hours, you're going to become an expert. And you have to do that in order to be successful, pretty much.
Okay.
Of course, that's not exactly what he says.
Yeah, I know where you're at with that. I guess I just have that's not the takeaway I got from it, but sure, let's say that that's a mainstream takeaway of the book. I would agree that a lot of people believe that.
Yeah, and that's what they hit on too. And so people see success as being this thing that you have to work really hard at, that it's like, yeah, you just have to do this kind of stuff. But then I didn't read David and Goliath, but apparently it really just talks about how there are these underdogs that can really win out and be really successful based on a lot of other factors, which kind of goes against the 10,000 hour rule to a certain extent. But it also hits it like there are other outliers.
Well, yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. Outliers. I see outliers as a descriptor. It's like the micro and the macro, right? Outliers is you. David and Goliath is how you play out in the world. You know what I mean? So like for you to gain your highest level of mastery, the 10,000 hours for Nick is correct. That doesn't mean that puts you at number 1 in the worldview. You know, you may only be the 2 millionth best soccer player in the world. If you look at, after you've done your 10,000 hours, you can still beat anybody on any given day because you have the capacity to do that. And that's the underdog philosophy. But that's you playing out in the world, not you as an individual.
Yes. And I think that was the argument that they were making, is that like that message wasn't understood by the message of the book. And so they were thinking again about it, how like maybe I could have written this in a different way to make the public a little more aware, and myself more aware of what this message means. So my whole point of this is just going back to that, like, we think there are these absolutes when in reality, like, there are just very few.
Yeah, and you know what? That's an interesting like point as well, because I even am I'm like the biggest victim of this. I'll sit there and I'll think about, and I'm like, there's got to be just a simple way to explain something. You know what I mean? And like to a certain degree, like without getting into the nitty gritty, there usually is. But man, like if you go, the minute you start testing it in different ways, it just falls apart. Even if like the core tenet of what you're trying to get across is pretty sound. Like if most people just followed like a basic principle, like put in 10,000 hours of work and you'll gain mastery, most people are going to benefit from that idea.
Yeah.
But it's when you start thinking like too absolute, like you're saying, about these things, that all of a sudden, like these ideas, it's like the 10,000 hours thing's like, okay, yeah, but like not really.
Yeah.
But so like I'm totally a victim of that. I'll be like, man, like there's got to be for example, there's got to be like a good solid, like this is a thought that crossed my mind a lot. There's got to be like 10 movements in like the workout spectrum that if I just pair them together and do them, like I'll hit like the broadest and like most complete level of maintainable fitness I can ever achieve. And I'm like, there's got to just be these 10 things that I always can just fall back on. Like I got to do these 10 things. And I'm pretty confident now that that's completely BS. There's foundational movements, sure, but our bodies are designed to adapt to the nuance of like just free flowing physical movement and high variance. So to think that you could do anything so siloed as 10 movements is just like almost laughable. Like there's no way. Like I think we've all seen the person or known the person or been the person who's like, yeah, I'm running. I'm a runner. I think it's very clear that does not produce the most optimal like health and longevity. So many people injure themselves running.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that book Born to Run was completely wrong.
I don't know much about that book at all.
So it took a look at like a lot of ancient tribes that were like traditional, like these ridiculous endurance runners. Like they did these extreme feats, like the original marathon was like a run in Greece that was like 26 point. I don't even think it was actually 26.2 miles. I think that was just like some cookie cutter number that got pulled out of a hat. But yeah, like there was 2 cities that required a long run, and then eventually like enough people were doing this that they decided to make a race out of it, whatever. But so it looked at these, and in a lot of ways, like we're bipedal hominids as human beings. We do have a very unique capacity to run long distances on our feet. That is a unique, like very uniquely human ability. But when you, like I heard this really interesting comparison recently where sure, we have the capacity to run. And like when we were a hunter-gatherer species, we would track, hunt, and follow, and we would literally run animals to exhaustion. They would collapse and we'd be able to like get food. That was but to think that that instance of a few tribes or whatever that would utilize their ability to run incredibly long distances and have crazy endurance, therefore means that is a species appropriate level of exercise on a daily basis, is where this falls apart. Because as we see, if you run too aggressively, too many days in a row, without proper equipment, without proper, physical preparedness, you will fall apart. You will get injuries. Running injuries are like it's the most injury prone sport, because there's so many overuse injuries that come as a result of it. And the case that was being made and what I was listening to is we're actually a long distance walking while carrying species.
Oh.
The ability to then find that animal that we've tracked and put 100 pounds on our back and make it all the way back is probably really where our true human nature. People don't get very injured walking, and you can load somebody up on their shoulders, put a weight vest on them, carry some dumbbells, whatever it is, like throw something over your back, and you can do a ridiculous amount of work in that sense. And it's a very, from looking at it from like a bioenergetic standpoint, like that lower intensity is like that fat burning mode. Like that's what people want to call it in the workout space. And there's a very strong case for human beings. You know, we carry excess fat in our midline, in our center of gravity as a very functional purpose. So by putting things on our back, doing this like long, steady, you know, elevated heart rate, but not maximal like a running would cause, we are actually, and you're getting that fat burning mode, we're probably like designed to tap into, I don't know, there's something like 40 to 80,000 calories of fat like on the average human body. So like they've estimated that's like something like 40 days worth of calories, like that's just sitting on your body. So to think that like, yeah, like get into a fat burning state, load yourself up because you're fine. You're not going maximal load, like you can't move, but you know, 100 pounds for, you know, the average fit person just walking is a doable, especially like take the whole balance equation out of it. As long as you're well balanced in the distribution of weight that you're carrying and you can handle the load, like you can walk a really long ways with that. So I think when you think about like from a function and a development of the human species standpoint, like we just have so many misconceptions about what is like really the function of being a human.
We're just like little toddlers in a preschool getting tossed into a playpen.
We're sheep in a giant experiment.
Oh man, sheep in an experiment. I was trying to make some fun with it, but
I just described simulation theory for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh gosh.
Yeah, wild.
But I mean, farmer's walk, right?
Farmer's great, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great exercise.
Yeah. It's actually been shown to be like restorative because you have to, when you go through your like natural gait, you load up differently each hip and each side of your body, and also carrying like with a farmer's grip, right? So you can do it loaded on your back or you can do it in your hands. And same thing, like with your normal gait pattern, your arms will swing. You have to tense up your upper back and your shoulders and everything. And you get like this really nice, evenly balanced stress coming on each of your shoulders independently. So it's like a very nice restorative motion in that way. You get your blood pumping. Like there's just so many benefits to loaded walking.
Yeah. Yeah. And running, man, I just have this like dark picture of a ankle just turning out and crack.
Yeah, it's like run when you need to, but loaded carry daily, I think is like a really good, even if somebody could just find like a 20-pound like sandbag that would just nicely drape across their shoulders, or like a vest can get expensive. So like I don't know about that, but like, man, like I think somebody, you know, go for an hour. It doesn't matter how far you get, just go for an hour. And then do that a couple times a week. I feel like people would probably start to feel a lot better. Cause I mean, like another benefit of loading, bone mineral density goes up. Like just the loading on your frame helps increase your bone mineral density. Like there's so many benefits to it.
I have an idea, actually.
Hit me.
Don't walk your dog, carry your dog.
I mean, if you didn't care about the dog, yeah.
Or if you really cared about the dog.
Sure.
You know, maybe it's hot out.
Your point is sound, but then don't forget to also walk the dog. Or let the dog walk itself in some way.
And make sure that your dog is more than what is Tink? 5 pounds?
Yeah. She's like 9 pounds. Come on, give her some credit.
So this is quite the tangent, but I think you did a good job of tying it into an evolutionary perspective. Well done, Brendan.
Tried to.
Yeah. Do you want to let them know or remind them who the professor that we spoke to was?
Yeah, Jamie Krems from Oklahoma State University. She's got a lab there where she's doing a lot of social psychology, and she looks at a lot of female social dynamics, I guess is how I would describe it.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really interesting conversation. Again, I kind of mentioned it in our like brief intro we did, but just stuff that, man, just it doesn't seem to be talked about in like the mainstream enough. Like I'm a big proponent of like trying to understand the human as like a subject.
Yeah.
Like what makes people tick. And I think she's like leaning some like extremely valuable insights with her work. So it was a great conversation.
Yeah. Why isn't that stuff talked about enough? Like we go through school and learn, don't get me wrong, math and like history and all these different subjects are great. But why aren't we learning about like relational dynamics or like how we communicate with each other and good ways of communicating with each other?
Yeah, I don't know. Why are we giving everybody first place trophies? Like,
why does everybody have access to social media?
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
I mean, these are all like, yeah, man.
Maybe it's good. I don't know.
I mean, the big thing that I constantly turn back to is like, I love looking at the evolutionary perspective, because evolution up until this point, pre-industrial revolution, let's call it, has so much like there was so much consistency. You know, we go 1,000,000 years, we go back 1,000 years. They're pretty dang similar, I would say. Of course, tool development has gotten better. I'm sure physical structure has gotten better. But like 1,000 years ago, man, like we were pretty basic on the evolutionary like spectrum. And then all of a sudden we hit this industrial, revolution, whatever. I mean, the one we call the Industrial Revolution 100 or whatever years ago. But like, I mean, we really started developing industriousness as like a species, maybe 1,000 years ago or so, and like forming cities and like all this other stuff. But man, the evolutionary perspective really opens my eyes to like, okay, if you take out the last 100 years, there's 1,000,000 years of evolution that probably can tell us more about the human experience than whatever kind of like psychotic break we entered once we hit the Industrial Revolution. Like, it is not the same environment anymore.
Oh yeah, we've changed a lot.
We've completely transformed what it means to be a human living on the earth. But the genetic development and the psychological development around the last 100 years has not caught up. We are not at the point where we are well suited to live in today's environment primarily, because our development has come from 1,000,000 years of evolution that went unchanged. So we got pretty steady with what the human animal was expecting in its environment and from a nutritional standpoint and whatever. So I love looking at it this way because, and I think that was what really intrigued me about our conversation, is that when we really look at like some of these social dynamics that happen, and again, like, I want to be very clear, like, we're two men talking about this and she studies a lot of women's issues. And like, we obviously are only speaking from, hypothesis and personal experience. Like, we don't know anything.
Yeah. We haven't researched this.
We have not like done adequate research to provide a single recommendation, but from our perspective, I think that, yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that does not go talked about, but I think it's very clear that young women experience it on a daily basis, especially like young women in the school systems. Like, man, like that whole idea of like trying to navigate the social hierarchy by tearing down the reputation of somebody else. Like, I would say most women in high school have experienced that.
Yeah.
To some degree. Even women who like may have been perceived to have been at the top are experiencing that.
Regina George.
Right. It's the Mean Girls hypothesis.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's really a hypothesis around that, but that's what I'm calling it.
No, so I forgot to show this to you, is that actually Dr. Krems was on this other podcast that I saw on YouTube, to where there were like two hosts and then two researchers, one of them being Dr. Krems. And they analyzed like Mean Girls and like what the function of
that's awesome.
The different things in that movie were. Yeah, and it's crazy.
Yeah,
like,
I'll have to check that out.
Exactly what you're saying, this hierarchy of really trying to obtain status and doing all these different things of like gossip or the indirect aggression and really manipulating different types of people's views. It was so present.
Yeah.
And it's like, that movie's hilarious. It's so good. But it's so scary at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
it's hilarious because it's a satirical look at the truth. You know what I mean? Like, it's just an overblown truth.
Oh my God, that's my life.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
Right. Like you don't literally know the person like that, but you know people, like not like everybody in that movie, but you know that there was the person who fit that role in your high school.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's like we're just watching the chaos unfold and kind of accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
Does it serve a purpose?
Does what serve a purpose? The hierarchy?
Like the extent of this aggression? Like if you think about Mean Girls, they take it to a pretty severe level, but also that severe level is very common in a lot of people's lives.
You know, one thing I think about in terms of this is like where, like I just was talking about, there's a string of human evolution that has occurred over millions of years. And a big part of that, in my opinion, was the fact that like humans are incredibly resilient. Like from injury to lack of food to whatever you want to think. Like as a species, humans are incredibly resilient. So one thing I think about a lot in like kind of the context of what we're talking about is, man, I want to take care of people. That's like a huge thing for me. Like that is when I look at like the human species, I really deeply do want to know everybody's being taken care of and like we're not doing anything to damage people.
Mm-hmm.
But man, to use like a pretty like overly masculinized like phrase here, like we're kind of allowing like the species to get soft in a way. And I just feel like we're not challenging the resiliency of people. So when you ask me, is there a function? Does it serve a purpose? I mean, man, I don't want to just baby everybody either, because as a human being, you are resilient, Nick, and I know you can overcome whatever's in front of you. So let's not fucking sugarcoat this.
Yeah.
Like you can overcome what is in front of you in your life. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I fear, again, going back to like I really want to take care of people. I think part of that is making sure that their basic needs are met. And I don't think we think of how we are structuring and communicating society is as a basic need. I think that people need challenge. They need to overcome. I think back to it too. And I'm like, if there was truly somebody who was like a Regina George, would enough people in the school have been so sick of her bullshit that a group of them would have pushed back on her? Probably. To think that somebody's going to go 4 years through, and like maybe not. I'm sure there's always going to be outliers. Mm-hmm. But man, I can't imagine an entire school just taking the shit of one person for 4 straight years and not like somehow navigating their way through that and getting past it. And you know, I'm not going to like be so naive to think that there's not going to be people who are going to like fall by the wayside and be truly victimized by somebody in high school. Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah.
But man, like the human spirit is like undeniably like incredible. And man, I want people to experience the feeling of like overcoming that, finding their group and like exploring themselves and understanding why that person's bad. And like, if somebody's really doing terrible things, I think the silent majority will push back on that person. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Like I really want to make sure people are like expressing their resiliency, and I don't want to make the world so soft and comfy for everybody. I think to a certain degree, we absolutely need to protect people. Mm-hmm. And like, there's some social and moral things that we need to do, but we also need to encourage people to like, you know, captain their own ship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, man, so I'm on both sides of this. I don't know what like the ideal is. And again, like the female experience in society is not my experience. So I'm just talking hypothetically here. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole, is there a function to it? I think there is, and there's, you know, a navigating social norms that has to come from also the fall of that person, right? Mm-hmm. The person at the top of the hierarchy, if they abuse that power, will likely lose the trust of the people. And, you know, I think there's a lot of a lot of loneliness at the top there. You know,
that was at play.
Those people Regina George may have been an extremely empty person.
And she also like broke her back. Like they had that justice in the movie, mm-hmm. which was pretty wild.
Yeah. So like, do we need to let that play out? Man, I don't know. While also encouraging everybody to look out for everybody as if we were in a tribe and not let somebody fall behind. I think that's true too.
Yeah.
You know, that tribal aspect of everybody needs to be carried up and lifted I think that's also equally true. And that's not being done in high school. That's maybe the biggest part that's missing.
Well,
more so than bringing the top down, I think we need to ensure that we're lifting the bottom up.
Yes, I think that's super important. And I think here is like where a complex issue that we were kind of talking about before we started recording this comes into play. So I feel like this is again just speculation, but it seems like there's a benefit to being popular, right? Because you socially are accepted by other people for the most part.
Yeah, which means talking in the interview, resources, right?
Yes, resources. And so if you're at the lower end of the hierarchy, maybe especially in today's day and age, you're not getting as much like physical interaction with people. And so maybe you turn to this online source and you find a group online, which, hey, there might be really great social support
There's
online.
no denying that there's going to be positive aspects that can come from social groups online. There's going to be.
But we were talking about this, that like how does that serve you? Like, are you actually being who you are online? Right. Mm-hmm. And is that what's being socially accepted, or are you being something else that's maybe not true to who you are? And so now you're maybe not accepted in high school or in the world physically, but now you're online virtually and you're feeling accepted. But those two things don't go together for your like true self versus your virtual self.
Yeah, you get to create an avatar of yourself that you like, your ideal self that you would like to maybe aspire to be. And it's really weird because in one way, like, that's a great thing. Like, you should have this future self that you're building. You're never a fully developed person, and you can always continue to develop yourself. But the minute you put a fake persona online that you want the world to see, there's probably this weird trigger of like, this is me. I'm done. Accept me for who I am as this completed person. Mm-hmm. And then it completely shunts development, you know, and progress as a person. So yeah, there's like, and we talked about it before with like this idea of, you know, when you go online, you're not accountable. You can turn it off. Mm-hmm. You're not accountable in the rest of your life for the person and who you are when you're online.
Yeah.
And the minute you step away from it, you can act like it was some other reality, but it's somebody else's reality on the other side of that screen. And yeah, how are you navigating that? I think it's extremely difficult to like navigate, especially, like you're saying, when you create this persona online, and who are you being? Like, people need to ask themselves that question. Mm-hmm. Who is the person that you're portraying your whole self? And if it's not, are you going to be upset if people see your whole self and don't like it? But then you weren't sharing it. Mm-hmm. So it feels almost like you're betraying them. It's a very weird dynamic. I don't know that we like have fully discovered how to like navigate this.
I definitely don't think we have, because it gives you total control, right? And like, why would you want to let go of that if you were maybe rejected in other instances physically with people. Like, right? Why would you want to turn back to that if you're feeling like, oh, well, now I finally have control and power about like maybe the social situations that I want to navigate. And like you're saying, if I'm in a group or if I'm talking to somebody and I just want to cut off and stop talking to them, I can just get out of that app and then go to a different app and talk to somebody else.
No accountability and responsibility.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, and this just ties into the indirect aggression. Yeah. It just exacerbates it, which I know that she talked about how that was not specific to female cooperation, but it was more so present in females rather than males. And now it's just present in everybody online.
Yeah. Yeah. Online it's literally the like facilitates the framework for indirect aggression to be like amplified.
Yeah. It does. Like some of these comments are so funny, but some of them are so toxic.
This is going to be an interesting one. I want to see what your response is to this. I may even have to like grab my phone and we can like, I'll show you later. But I saw this, we were fresh off of the Andrew Reiner interview we did, right? And I comment on a video of, so Tom Bilyeu's wife, you know Tom Bilyeu? He does Impact Theory.
Oh yeah.
And yeah. So that's another podcast that I listen to. And his wife does another show as like part of their like little network they've got. And she was interviewing somebody on negative. Oh, like it was so funny. It was the opposite of what we were talking about with Andrew, where we were talking about men are being told in society they can't show their emotion, right? And they're bottle those things up. On the opposite end of the spectrum, women are being sold this, you're an emotional species.
Oh, yeah.
You're hyper emotional. So being emotional is normal, but like it's getting like, it's the weird thing in society where now we just want to peg everything as like, oh, she's emotional. It's kind of the men over identifying in young ages who don't fully develop as just like the one emotion that expresses his anger. So I commented on it and I was like, hey, this is like a really dynamic issue. One thing that I think is important to consider here is that like not only are women being put in this box, but like we're raising our young men in this other box of not understanding how to process and deal with emotions. Like, they are like dynamic correlated issues.
Yeah.
One plays into the other and they play back and forth and they increase one another. So I made this, I commented and this guy comments back on my comment. And I was like, floored. I don't know if the dude didn't listen to the video, but he goes like, I'm trying to make the case for like men in society do not talk about enough how to process and deal with their emotions.
Yes.
And that's important because men need to have the capacity to do this. So this dude starts going off about like, you can't sugarcoat everything for guys. You don't want to make them like unable to like be strong and stand up to things. He goes like, imagine if somebody like was about to like harass your mom, your sister, your girlfriend. You need to be big and strong so you can stand up for them.
Oh,
and I'm like,
man, he's playing right into what is going on.
This dude was the example I was trying to make.
Yes, on both sides.
On both sides. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I had to respond back. I'm like, I think you're missing the point and overthinking this. Nobody's saying that you shouldn't like be strong and stand up for, you know, the people in your life. And like the fact that you want to say like, no, don't sugarcoat shit. You've got to be big and strong. That's the ideal of the problem.
Yeah. And for specifically the women in your life.
Correct.
Right? Like, come on.
Yeah. Like, sure. Be like, you should always be ready to like defend and protect and be brave for the people that you love. Right.
Yeah.
But man, like, don't forget that you're like a full person too. And that's a full person. And you both need to be able to, and if you after are fully developed, like you want to fall into gender norms and that's how you negotiate your personal relationships in your life. Great. But that's personal choice.
Yeah.
And to think that like it's a male responsibility to fill one specific gender role, and that is be big and strong and protect. It's like, sure, like I'm sure in a lot of cases that makes sense, but like that is also, don't be so naive to think that that never causes problems.
Everyone needs to be big and strong and protect at some point, and everyone needs to be sad and angry and frustrated and stressed at some point
and
too.
Understand how to navigate those emotions. So I was completely floored. And I think it was like a really telling, especially like with this whole conversation we're having now too about, you know, like gender dynamics and in society and everything like that. Man, it was so funny just to see like front and center the example of what we were like navigating and talking about on with Jamie and with Andrew, like these last two interviews. Like it was so funny to just see that like come through. I'm like, wow, like that guy was a snapshot of society, and that's the problem, right?
And what does he feel like he gains out of telling you that? Like, is he seeing that he can put himself higher up on the hierarchy by saying, you need to be big and strong? Like, is he telling people that I'm big and strong and I'm going to like reinforce that to other people?
I was just telling myself that this was a Russian bot. This dude had 6 pictures. He was flexing in 4 of them.
Wow.
And like just the stereotypical, like, man, like, I almost wanted to, like, I had a couple really like charged responses ready. Like, dude, you're the person I'm talking about.
Let's get this guy on the podcast.
Right? Like, should we break this guy down?
Yeah.
No, but like, and I ended up being like, this is the dumbest platform for me to try and like educate this guy. And like my comment had the most likes on this post. So like I was at the top and people were seeing these comments.
Let's go.
So I mean, I don't know, man. It was interesting, but I was like, I responded in like hey, I think you're overthinking this. Like what I said, I was like, but yeah, I mean, that was such a great example of this mic or indirect aggression and how like online is it's just getting played out to a whole new level.
Oh yes, it is. I mean, I always go back to like, on the one hand, it's cool that anybody can like say what they want for the most part and just like get those words out. But yes, they are ridiculous, like so ridiculous. I wanted to go back to, before we wrap up, we've gone a decent amount of time here. This has been pretty fun. Mm-hmm. But when you were talking about like an evolutionary perspective and you said tool development, I had this joke that popped up into my head. You probably noticed that I was like laughing. It's pretty stupid, but I thought you were going to kind of go through like, yeah, so there was like fire and the wheel, and I was going to make a joke saying,
and then Chad.
Damn it, yeah. Now we have Brad and Chad.
Yeah. Literally tool development led to more tool development.
It does. And
think about
whatever this guy's username was who was throwing some shade at you for navigating just the social sphere of trying to be human.
Yeah.
Like, and his name's got to be Brad.
The complete miss of like me, I wasn't trying to tell anybody what to do, but like you can still be supportive of people and like recognize that there's, and actually this is part of my response I gave him. I was like, this is an extremely complex issue, and no one experience or no one recommendation can lend itself to every experience.
Yeah.
There's so many different experiences. And I recognize that guy probably had a very different experience than me, where being a strong man in that dude's life may very well have actually been a necessity.
Yeah.
So like all the credit to that dude for being what he needed to be in his environment.
Russian bot's got to be strong.
That's right. But man, like to think that that is now some universal norm that everybody should follow is an extremely arrogant thing to think.
Yes.
Like ego needs to be checked on that one. Like not all environments demand that.
Yeah. I appreciate you just acknowledging that it might have been really beneficial in his environment.
I mean, sure. Yeah. Like I just like he didn't know me. Maybe he didn't recognize that, but I don't know him and I don't know his environment, and he didn't get the context of this thing. So sure, I'll deploy a little empathy. That guy may have been the truest of true in that dude's heart, good intention. Like
he may have just lived with a pack of wolves, and
I mean, shoot, like people live in much rougher environments than I have.
Yeah.
So if you had, mothers and sisters and girlfriends who were consistently being harassed, environment dictated action in that point. And sure, go for it. But it's not a universal experience.
But was his comment repressed sadness? That was
I'm sure it was, again, like what I wanted to say, which was like, hey buddy, seems like you haven't really worked through your emotions. You may be expressing one emotion of confusion or sadness as just anger.
Yes.
Like maybe you should think about figuring out what emotion you're feeling in this moment. Yeah, but I'll save that for you and the professionals.
Oh my goodness, Brendan, this has been a good one.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking with us. If you made it this far, we started talking about UFOs. That went crazy. I butchered a UFO propulsion system theory. That was great. Then we got into the real good stuff, which was our talk with Jamie. And then now we're wrapping it up with some good old anecdote.
Good old anecdote. So yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. And we look forward to having another office hours after that, where we throw some pretty ridiculous ideas around. Maybe we'll get back to UFOs. Maybe not.
Maybe we do just a whole thing on the current state of UFOs.
Wow. I think they're all fake.
It's possible.
I don't know.
It's even potentially probable.
That was me just throwing out another joke, but they might be all fake. Let us know.
They might not be.
All right. See you, everyone.